February 18th, 1982. A 21-year-old Leon Moncer was last seen leaving his residence in Bellaire, Ohio. His car would be found by the side of the road a couple of days later. His wallet, cigarettes, and spare key were still in the car, but Leon was nowhere to be found. The local paper reported on his case a few days after his disappearance. They said he was a kind, helpful, caring man. While some people may remember him that way, the women in his life, they had a different perspective. He was known to abuse and cheat on every woman he had been with, and he was a drug dealer in the community. So when he vanished, there were a few people in town that turned a blind eye. It seems this may have included some of the local investigators. His soon-to-be ex-wife, Irene, spoke politely of him, despite the abuse she suffered at his hand. She had a 3-year-old daughter with this man, who deserved to know what happened to her father. Unfortunately, 43 years have passed, and no one knows for sure what happened to Leon Moncer. And his daughter? She's still looking for answers. This case is brought to you by Chaos Rules in Madhouse, Madison County, Missouri. This rural community should be a safe place, but it hides a dark secret. Fredericktown is one of the most dangerous places to live in America. With a crime rate of 31 per 1,000 residents, Fredericktown has one of the highest crime rates compared to all communities of all sizes. I started researching one case sent to me by a desperate grandmother that led me to 15 more. Then I realized this county has had murder, corruption, and chaos since before the Wild West days. This book will start with a lynching by a Fredericktown mob in 1844 and will end up in an explosion. Hold on to your seats when you read this one. You're in for a wild, chaotic ride through rural Missouri. Check out my new book, Madhouse, Madison County, today. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Chasing Justice on True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Sonova Cantrell. On the line, I have two of my favorite co-hosts. I have fellow victims advocate Cricket Andrews. How are you, Cricket?
I'm good. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining.
I've also got my favorite research assistant, Miss T. How are you?
I'm good. I hope everyone's doing good.
I think tonight we have a case that is one of those a little more difficult to talk about, because we like to talk about cases where the victim is an innocent, sweet person that everyone wants to get behind and fight for justice for. Unfortunately, the person we're going to talk about tonight, he made a lot of bad decisions in his life, ended up where he was, and now his poor daughter has gone 43 years without answers, and everything could be tied back to the lifestyle of the victim himself. So while we are not encouraging victim shaming whatsoever, keep your comments clean and polite, please, because the family most likely will watch this. So I want you to keep everything polite, but we are going to be talking about a difficult case with a difficult subject. And this is the case of Leon Moncer. Now, I have several people that have signed on in advance. I appreciate that. I always like to see your conversation starting even before we do. That's always helpful. Now, I want to talk to you about this gentleman. I'm going to show you his picture real quick. This is Leon Moncer. He was 21 years old when he disappeared. Now, he disappeared on February 18th, 1982. He was last seen leaving his residence in Bellaire, Ohio. His car would be found beside the road a couple of days later. Strangely, his wallet, his cigarettes, and his spare key were in the car, but Leon was nowhere to be found. Now, while the newspapers and everyone publicly tries to praise this gentleman as a good-hearted, helpful, hardworking man, we need to understand that the women in his life did see a different perspective of this man. He abused alcohol and drugs, and when he was under the influence, he had a habit of violence towards the women he was with. He also was a drug dealer, and he was known to literally cheat on every woman that he was with. So it wasn't necessarily that we're talking about a a saint here, but we are talking about someone who still needs justice, someone who had two parents who fought for answers and ended up dying without the answers that they needed. Now, he has a 3-year-old daughter. By the time he went missing, he had a 3-year-old daughter and a soon-to-be ex-wife named Irene. Now, he had been in the process of getting a divorce, but they weren't completely finished with it. He had been seeing another woman. Her name has been labeled as Gigi just to save her identity. Her name is, we're not sure. Her name's not publicly been announced, but we will call her Gigi. Now, he continued his bad behavior. You would like to think that if his marriage was being dissolved because of his bad behavior, because of his cheating and his violence and his substance abuse, you would like to think that he would have the strength within himself to make a change the next time around. However, before his divorce is even finalized, he has gone on to another girlfriend. He has proposed to her already, and he has already beaten her up and broken her nose. Now, Gigi has older brothers who were furious, and that is where the theory stands of what happened to this man. But I will tell you, there are a lot of theories in this case, and the more I get into this case, the more I dismiss most of them. So we're going to be talking about the case of Leon Muncer. Now, he was a hardworking man. He had 2 or 3 jobs by the time he disappeared. We don't know for sure that he passed away. I can't say that, but he disappeared. We do know that he was trying to start his own business. He was trying to restart his life after his marriage's collapse. He was trying to co-parent his daughter. He wasn't an absentee father. He was trying to be there for her. We do also know that just before he died, a few weeks or a month or so before he died, he did get into a bar fight at a local bar that was known to be frequented by the mafia hangout, the kind of mafia place that all the mobsters like to hang out. We do know that he got into a fight with some potential mob associates. We do know that he also received a mysterious death threat in the mail within the week before he passed away. It was a letter that had no return address and no stamp. It had his name on it, and inside it was a letter that was created by cutting out letters from different magazines, and it said, "Leave this alone or you're dead." Now, he dismissed this through this way and went on with his life. He did seem to be slightly more protective of his daughter after that, but other than those slight changes, he went on with his life. Now, we are talking about a smaller man who tended to have a little bit of an ego issue. It would seem that a lot of times when you have a man with a large ego but a small frame, they seem to get into that bulldog mode, and it would seem like he got into fights pretty regularly. Now, this is just my analysis from researching several cases, but this seems to be his pattern of behavior. Now, he did have, like I said, he had a soon-to-be ex-wife with a daughter, and then he had Gigi. Now, on the night that he went missing, he did tell his brother. They were having some kind of birthday party for his older brother, and he did tell his brother that he couldn't come to the party because he had a hot date. Now, whether that was a real date, whether that was a plant and a setup to ambush him, whether that was a joke, no one really knows. No one questioned it. No one thought it was Gigi, though, because they weren't sure that he had made up with her yet or if he was going to make up with her. So we do know that he supposedly had a hot date. Now, we do know that he left his home. He left his parents' home, and he drove by his boss's house, borrowed $20 for some reason, and then he supposedly went to a nearby town to hang out with a man named Ted, and then he may or may not have been seen at a local bar in that town. Now, the only We have no way of really corroborating that because the only person that can give us that information is his ex-wife, Irene, which I find it suspicious that she knows everything that this man did on the night that he went missing when nobody else does. And she's supposed to be his ex-wife. So I really have a doubt in my mind thinking that if they are separated, they are nearing their final of their divorce. Why would she know his date night agenda? So I really have a hard time with that because we weren't able to verify that. So we have to take that as what it is and say this is a potential of what he was doing that night. Now, we do know that the car would be found on the road 2 days later. It was found by Irene and potentially his brother Raymond. Now, they were driving along, they found his car. I did find a car like his. I did find a car like his, but his was gray. So I will show you the kind of car he had. Let me get here. Here we go. Okay, so this is the kind of car he had. I think it's called a Dodge Aspen, but his was gray. And so this is the kind of car we were looking for. And it was found along the highway, along a back road. It was not actually a highway, it's a back road, near some mines. So this is a very rural area where you could drive on back roads for an hour and never see another car. So anyways, they did find his car. Strangely, even though the police had gotten a report, a missing persons report, filed the day he didn't show up for work. They got another call the next day from the wife and or the brother, and was told that they found the car. Now, the car, there is some discrepancies of how the car was found. One report says that the car was found idling with the doors open and the windows on, the lights on. But there was no one to really verify that account. Irene says that she found the car and it wasn't that way. And then supposedly somebody nearby said, "Oh, I seen it. I was the one that shut the car off and turned the lights off." If that is the case, why police didn't pursue that lead, I don't know. But then to make matters even worse, when the family called in to say they found Leon's car, the police did not come out and check the car. The police would normally, standard procedure would be, okay, don't touch anything. We're on our way. They would come in, they would rope the area off. They would detail the car and get all of the forensic evidence they could on site. They would take pictures. They would take measurements. They would look off into the grass and the woods to see if they could find the missing man. But in this case, Irene has gone on record to say that the police told her just haul it off, get it out of the road. And so what they did was they called a tow truck, and that tow truck hauled it to Leon's parents' house where it sat in their yard for 10 years and was never formally investigated. So there we have lost a massive amount of evidence. We do not know if Leon was only in that car by himself. We do know what was found in that car. His wallet, his cigarettes, and strangely, his spare key was found in that car. We also know that there were beer cans and an empty bottle of wine. Now, if he was the type to drink wine alone, perhaps he was alone. But I tend to think if he was out on a rural back road, pulled off the edge of the road, he was probably doing what us Southern people call necking, and that's what and he shared that wine with someone else. So the question is, where did that someone else go? Was that someone else actually a plant by whoever wanted to ambush this man? So this is kind of where I start with my theories. I wanted to talk to you guys and let you know that we need to understand that this is not this is not going to be a victim bashing type of video, but I'm not going to be nice. I am not going to be overly polite. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that this man was a saint and that the police should have gone overboard and beyond and pushed through because this man was such a good person. The police should have done their job because that is their job. It doesn't matter if it's a good person, if it's a bad person, if it's an unruly person. The police have a job to do, and they did not do their job. Even the cold case unit that is now in charge of it, most of the time you don't get cops downing other cops, but even the cold case unit has publicly said they are very disturbed by the lack of investigation at the beginning of this case. So Cricket, I'll let you chime in here real quick while I check some of the comments. What did you think when you got on this case first? The first thing you want to do, I know, is jump on the bandwagon of, oh my gosh, what kind of person we're talking about. When you're talking about a wife beater, you're talking about a drug dealer, you're talking about a cheater, I'm thinking, the first thing you want to say is okay, well, he made choices that got him in trouble. And this may be true. He made choices that got himself in trouble. But the police still have a job to do. This man still had parents that didn't deserve this. He still had a daughter that didn't deserve this. So you still have to follow through and do your job. Whether, if you're a cop, you still got to do your job, whether you like the victim or not. What do you think, Cricket? I think that may have played a role in their complacency.
Yeah, well, I feel like no matter what the person has done, no matter what they're like, there's still victims.
Right.
Looking for answers. So,
well, yeah, that's exactly it.
And with Irene, because this kind of, I feel like it was a setup. Like you said, somebody knew what time he was going to be where.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And her name keeps popping up and all that, but yet there's nothing she has been able to show anybody.
Right. Irene, for those of you that don't know, is the soon-to-be ex-wife. And Irene has been very vocal. Irene has talked to any kind of news agency or police department that's come forward and asked her questions. She has talked to them. There's a tendency of wanting vengeance. So she had suffered abuse by this man, and if you want to be petty, it would be real easy to say, well, this man hurt me. I don't care what happened to him. But she is also able to say, whatever he did, I have a daughter that needs to know what happened to her father, whether I like the guy or not, And so to me, that shows a bit of character on her part, that she's still at least able to talk about this. And she never has publicly badmouthed him in any way. And so this is what I think we need to understand. The police have a job to do, whether they like the person or not. And in the beginning of this, they didn't talk to all the people that they should have talked to. There came up a few sightings after he disappeared. So for one, they should have pushed and got some verification that he did get a letter. So if he did get a letter, whether he threw it away or not, I'm sure he talked to somebody about it. I'm sure somebody else saw it. Something. They didn't ever verify that letter actually came through. So you have one person saying that he got a letter, and we don't have a letter to look at. If we had the letter, we could look for fingerprints, we could look for DNA, we could look for all those kinds of things, but we don't have the letter. And this is where I feel like if the police had done what they're supposed to at the beginning, for one, they would have talked around town to see maybe if they could find out who sent him the letter. For two, they would have found out Gigi's brothers. They would have scoped them out completely. Because everyone wants to go to it's Gigi's brothers. I think that's a convenient answer. Yeah, I think honestly, if that was the answer, the police would have figured that out in 43 years.
I think they're using that as more of a scapegoat.
Absolutely. So this is where
people don't think otherwise.
Right.
You can't prove they did anything.
Well, in
But
this type of case, we can't prove anything. Somebody's going
exactly.
to have to come forward and say something. And this is what's so sad. The daughter is fighting for a man she never got to know. You know, she was 3 when he disappeared. She never got to know him. Okay. She has, most kids don't have much for memories at 3 years old. So she probably doesn't even remember him directly. She might remember through stories. She might remember through pictures, but she doesn't have all those moments that she can look back on and have any memory. So she is looking for answers because she has a blank space in her history. And then she watched her grandpa literally worry himself to death, fret himself to death, stress himself to death. She watched him die without answers. And so when she come forward, I think the last time they did a big public push on this was 2015. When there was a big public push and she was talking to the reporters, she's like, I'm not interested in even who did it. She's like, or what happened. She's like, I'm not interested in anybody getting punished. She's like, I just need to bring him home and I want to bury him next to his dad. She's like, that's what I can do for my grandpa who literally died of a broken heart, not knowing what actually happened to his son. And see, this is something that we've talked about on this channel before. It's real easy to blame, murderers and rapists and killers and all these things. And then absolutely just pour all your hatred out to anybody closest to them. But what you need to realize is the people closest are their first victims. So you have a serial killer out killing people. The first person he proverbially killed was his mother and his sisters and his dad and his cousins and his friends. They are their first line of victims. And a lot of times they get ostracized and mistreated and abused, and they didn't do anything. They were victimized just like everyone else. They may have not been killed, but they are a victim as well. And so in this situation, you've got a daughter who's had to live with the fact that it seems like half the people in this area said good riddance when her father was disappeared, because there's rumors that he just ran away, and we're going to address those. But so we need to realize that the mother and the father are victims in this situation. So whether some says Gigi's brothers actually did get vengeance for him hitting their sister, they actually have more than one victim. If they actually followed through and killed Leon Muncer, they also destroyed his mother, his father, and his daughter. Okay. So when you have, and this is kind of the reason why I titled this Choices and Consequences, what you do is going to have a consequence whether you feel justified in doing what you're doing or not. So, say these people have felt justified in whatever they done to this man, but it still left a consequence. The consequence is this daughter, 43 years, still can't find answers, still doesn't have anything to take home and bury next to her grandpa. So everything you do, and this is one of those situations where when this man, his choices, he's 21 years old, you back in the early 80s, late 70s, men were rowdier and things like that. And so you have communities who say, oh, he was a good guy, he was a great guy. Well, behind closed doors, he was beating the crap out of his wife. That's not a good guy. But this is a difference in what society was back then. People turned their blind eye to that and let women get abused. And so this is why you find some of that conflict. You see, people that, oh, I worked with him, he's a great guy. Well, he may have been a great guy to you, but he wasn't a great guy when he got high and beat the crap out of his girlfriend. So this is a kind of a difference in society we're talking about as well. Nowadays, there's still way too much domestic violence, but at least nowadays women feel like they can come forward. There's a safe place to come forward, and they weren't able to do that back then. So
Yes,
just
and
the fact that,
they don't have to make that choice
right.
because there is no question you're being arrested.
Right. Well, and back then, you also have to think about how brave it was for his wife to go ahead and divorce him, because back then in the early 80s, you have a man was supposed to be the head of the house. The man was the one that was the income. Your whole society, your whole place in society was based on the man. And so if you divorce that man, you lost all your friend circle, you lost your income, you lost your house, you lost everything. And so a lot of women didn't have the courage to step forward. So, but this is what we need to understand. What you choose to do, there is a reaction. And I was talking to one of you girls earlier today. I'm a kid of the 80s, and back then, you said something to somebody, you kind of watched your mouth a bit, because if you said something to somebody, you had to be prepared for the immediate consequence, and you may lose some teeth in the process. There was immediate consequences to what was said and done. Nowadays, everybody wants to say whatever they want, they want to do whatever they want, but they don't. Then they get all offended and all upset because they got consequences. And so this is where we need to understand, because the police chose not to follow through in the beginning, this case is utterly destroyed. There is only one way this case is going to get solved, and that is I guess two. If somebody finds his body, and if somebody talks, and that's it. There's no forensic evidence, there's no witness statements, there's no photographic evidence, there's no pictures. They didn't even go out and photograph the car. So in reality, in a court case type of thing, we can't even say definitely that car was where they said it was, because we don't have anything to back up the story. And so when we've talked about these things before, when you're investigating something, you have to keep the court case in the back of your mind. You've got to double check and triple check and re-verify everything, and cover your backside extensively, because what's going to happen is the defense attorney is going to try to tear apart everything that you've done. And so that wasn't done in this case. There was nothing done in this case. Now, you'll find out that there was a few reported sightings. So let's go into that. Before I get into the reported sightings, Miss T, I haven't heard anything out of you. Did you have a comment about something we've said so far?
Well, it astounds me that the cops didn't even take the car or search the car. I mean, that's huge. And did they even question, like, this Ted person that he supposedly went and seen? Who's Ted? And the guys that he got in the bar fight with, did they ask about that? I mean,
doesn't look like they investigated anything, and you're going to find out that they actually lost the case file for years. So we're gonna get into that. But the reported sightings, let's talk about the reported sightings. There's so much that I could go off on a rant on. So I tried to bullet point. And so if you see me looking up at the top of my screen, it's because I've got my notes up there, because I don't want to go off on a tangent too much. But reported sightings. Now, there was a couple of people who thought they seen him in town after he disappeared, which is somewhat typical. None of those could be verified. There was one person who thought they seen him walking along the road, and that couldn't be verified as well. And then there was one strange sighting that I would like to talk to you about. This one is a mysterious watcher. Okay. Now, his ex-wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, she says that, hang on, I lost my notes. Hang on. She says that for up to 2 years, that, why can't I find this? Okay. For up to 2 years, every once in a while, there would be a man standing in the shadows outside her house after dark. She never could see him. She wondered if it was him. She wondered if it was somebody else. She was wondering, and in all reality, she would call the cops. She would call the original investigators. The original investigators would get there within 20 or 30 minutes, and they never could catch this man on her property. They never could find any evidence that there was a man on her property. But every once in a while, she would call in this tip. She thinks there's a man standing outside in the shadows. And then she tells newspaper reporters that she thinks she has this fantastical tale. She thinks that, well, maybe it's Leon. Maybe he got that death threat, and maybe he wanted to protect us, so he disappeared, and that's him coming back at night just to watch over us and make sure it's okay. That's very Hollywood. That's very movie-ish. That if someone is under the threat of death and they decide to leave their existence, they don't come back like that. They would not allow themselves to be seen whatsoever. They would not come back like that. Now, you're going to find out that there's a few things in the stories that we hear from the ex-wife that I kind of question. Now, I'm not blaming nothing. I'm saying time has passed, and I'm saying trauma can distort your memories. And so this is where we're going to go with that. But the reported sightings were the people randomly maybe have seen them through town. And then for 2 years, up to 2 years. And then strangely, after a short period of time, she moved a few miles on down the road. And somehow this man, mysterious watcher guy, somehow showed up in the yard of her new house. Okay. And so instead of calling the police department closest to her, she calls back to the other county where she had been talking to people before, and she calls them to come out. Well, it takes them even longer to get there this time. And they never find the man. They never can get there in time. And I find it really odd that she would call someplace that she knows is not going to make it there in time. Instead of calling the cops that are right around the corner, she calls the cops in the other county that she used to live in. Now, to me, that's a little bit strange.
Yeah, that's odd.
And again, we're saying trauma could make you do crazy things. But we also need to understand that trauma can cause you to think you see somebody and it's actually somebody else. You can think you see a shadow in the corner of your yard, and it's not a shadow at all. It's a bush. It's not a person. It's so we need to understand that just because we kind of hesitate to really kind of go along with that narrative doesn't necessarily mean that we think she's lying or that we think that she's purposely trying to say something. We do believe, however, that trauma and time can distort your memories. And I've made some videos on how, if you study the statistics, how unreliable eyewitness statements really are. We tend to think eyewitness statements are accurate, but if you start studying this, when you study criminology, you will find that eyewitness statements, especially when there's tense trauma involved, they're only about 30% accurate sometimes. Sometimes they can get down to 30% accuracy, and so we think that, well, if you've seen it, and there you go. That's not accurate. That's not the way the brain works.
If you're going through trauma from a person and you're constantly in that fear, you're going to see them in other people. It's because it's just instilled in you.
Right. Well, and that's all you're thinking about.
Exactly.
So that's all you think. Your brain is going to look for what you're emotionally charged with. So I've talked about the RAS before. When I was doing coaching, I talked about it a lot. There is a part of your brain called the reticular activating system. It looks like about a pencil right here on the back of your brainstem, right where your brain connects to your brainstem, and your spinal cord. It literally acts as a filter according to what you're emotionally attached with. So if you want a good, accurate rendition of what the RAS does, think about the last time you got a new vehicle or a new shirt or something that you was really excited about. You thought it was the greatest thing since sliced cheese. And then all of a sudden, everywhere you look, everybody had the same car. Everybody had the same shirt. You're like, man, I thought this was cool. Now everybody and their dog has one.
Yeah.
Well, everybody and their dog already had one. but you didn't notice it because you wasn't emotionally charged with that. You wasn't emotionally connected to that. So when you get emotionally connected to something, the RAS in your brain starts filtering that as that is more important. So you take that and multiply it by 1,000 when you're dealing with intense trauma in a case like this. The fact that she thinks she sees somebody that is walking by the road and she thinks she sees her missing loved one in that person, that is absolutely 100% how the brain works. So
Yes.
we're not in any way discounting what Irene had to say. We're just saying there is a chance that this could be misconstrued because of trauma. And so we want to understand that. So do I think he was actually there's that theory that he just he was under too much pressure because he was getting divorced. He was trying to start a side business, and then he got this death threat, so he just ran off. I don't believe that. Girls, do you believe that?
No, and I don't think he'd have been lingering around
Mm-mm.
in the
No.
shadows.
No.
If
he had successfully got away
with the child,
yeah.
he's not going to suddenly,
right.
back
He's
off
not
of-
going to successfully get away and then come back and put her back in danger.
Exactly.
So I don't think that's Tammy. What was you trying to say? Because I know you have a hard time.
That sounds like hopeful thinking on her part, like what you were just talking about. Like in the back of her mind, she's just hoping he's still alive, and maybe he's somewhere there watching her.
And that's absolutely normal behavior whatsoever. It's absolutely normal. Now, we will talk about some scams that have come against this family, and I want to express them because I have a lot of victims' family members that watch my shows, and I want to make sure you're not targeted by these same things. So we're going to talk about that, but you'll find that there were some scam artists that come in and try to breed more hope into them than what they already had. And to me, that is one of the cruelest things you could ever do. But so we're going to jump into the investigation. Now, the investigation initially lacked enthusiasm. That is the polite, politically correct way to say what I would really like to say about the cop's job. So being very polite, it lacked enthusiasm. But the cold case team has picked up and tried to find answers for the family. I mean, they are still taking leads. They're taking calls. They're chasing leads. In 2015, it actually led them to a nearby town, and I think it was Columbus, Ohio. It led them to a nearby town where they dug up somebody's basement. So they are actively trying to do what they can. But this is where we need to understand that when the case is destroyed in the beginning, it is almost impossible to overcome it. And that's why it's so important for things to be done in a specific manner, in a specific way. And that's also a reason why I tell family members and volunteers that are in there trying to find evidence for slow-moving law enforcement and people that are trying to do their own investigation, be very, very careful. Make sure everything you do is extremely valid, because it can be taken apart in the court case, and you can also destroy the case in your eagerness. Nobody blames you for being eager. Nobody blames you for trying to push in when the police aren't doing anything fast enough, when they're moving at a snail's pace or not at all. But that's the reason why I try to educate my audience and say, be very careful the way you do things, because you don't want to hinder anything as well. You want to kind of give the police a kick in the rump and say, get on the stick and do your job. But you don't want to push so hard that it gets destroyed. And I feel like this case right here has been destroyed from the beginning. The moment they didn't investigate to find out who Gigi's brothers are and talk to them, the moment that they didn't talk to Gigi, the moment that they didn't get confirmation on that letter, the moment that they didn't get confirmation of all of these sightings of where he could have possibly been, the moment they couldn't tie down a timeline of where this man went that last date night, the moment that they let that car be towed away by somebody not other than law enforcement, the moment that they let it sit out there for 10 years in the weather and just be deteriorated into nothing, the moment they did all those things, they consigned this case to a cold case file. And so this is where you also, on the other side of things, as family members and as volunteers, you need to push and keep going. Just be careful how you go, because you don't want things to not be done. There's a critical window in every case that it makes or breaks the case. I bring up every once in a while, I bring up, the John Benet Ramsey case. That case could have been solved instantly if the police department had done what they're supposed to do, and if they would have got out of their ego and let all of the help that was being offered to come in. But Boulder, Colorado Police Department got in this ego trip and said they could handle it themselves. And they let the crime scene be destroyed and ransacked. They let all the forensic evidence be destroyed and ransacked, and they still will not allow the FBI or anybody to come in and help. And so we want to, as advocates and as volunteers, we do want to push through and make sure things are done in a timely manner. We just got to be careful about it. So I'll get off my little soapbox there.
One thing I'd like to say, no matter who the person is that is missing, they were somebody's son, somebody's sister, somebody's child. They were loved.
Yep.
Somebody needs answers. So speak out.
They're not judges.
No.
They're not judges. They're police.
Exactly.
Their job wasn't to judge. Their job was to police and be detectives and investigators. And this is where we need to understand, if you don't like your job, and I said this a lot when we were going over the Madison County cases, and I have some Madison County folks on the live chat. If you don't like your job, get another one. It's real simple. Put your resume in somewhere else and do something else. Because if you don't have the ethics to take on a case when you don't like the victim, then you don't have a right to do that job. I don't care how good at it you are. If you don't have that kind of morality to where you're going to do your job and get justice, whether you like them or not, then you aren't qualified to be that investigator. You need to go find something else to do. And I feel like this man was judged at the beginning and never got his case worked like it was supposed to, because he was judged because of his lifestyle.
Yep.
Now, I do not condone his lifestyle at all.
No.
To me, you can ask the girls. I had some rants on phone calls today. I'm like, I'm kind of a heathen from Texas. A man goes to try to hit me. I'm getting a weapon and he may not survive it. That ain't happening in my world. I don't take that. I don't have no patience for that. Nobody should no man should ever hit a woman for nothing.
They hit you once, get out.
You're done. Well, I'm like, grab a frying pan and make sure that guy is unconscious for a while. I'm just like, but here's my thing. On the other hand, nowadays, you've got a lot of women abusing men, and then the men can't defend themselves either. So I don't agree with anybody abusing their spouse, whatever kind of abuse it is, physical or mental or emotional. If you have to be an abuser, then you don't have what it takes to be in a relationship. You need to be out of a relationship, fix your own crap, and then get back in a relationship. So, but anyways, off of that tangent. But that's the reason why I have notes, because I'm like, I'm going to go off on so many tangents here.
But I'm glad that more men are speaking up.
Right. Because, we had some famous cases in court recently. She was the abuser, and he lost a lot of money and a lot of things, and a lot of jobs and everything else because he was labeled the abuser. And I'm like, that's not always the case. Okay, so let's get into the scams that this poor family has had to deal with. So this family has already had to deal with their loved one being missing. They already had to deal with that trauma. Then they had to deal with the fact that the police are, in their lackluster behavior towards their case. So they've already had to deal with that trauma. Now they're having to deal with 6 SOBs that literally are taking advantage of them. Now, the first thing that happens to this poor family, the day or two after they file the missing persons report, the mother is on the phone. Now, we're talking early 80s, and back then you had an actual operator that's connecting your phone calls, so you had an actual human. It wasn't a computer doing everything.
You were on the party line.
And so that operator could interrupt you while you're talking and say, hey, you need to get off here, or you need to do this, or so they could do that. Well, while the mother was on the phone with someone late one evening, the operator interrupts her phone call and says, I need you to disconnect your call. You have an emergency call coming in from a man named Arthur Moncer. So, oh my gosh, she flips out. She gets off the phone. This poor woman waited all night long. Her son didn't call. He was missing. So some SOB actually called into the operator as if this was a collect emergency call from the man he knew was missing. So see, right there is a lead right there. The operator knows where that phone call came from. The police should have contacted the operator, found out where that phone call came from, traced down who made that call, and questioned them. Because that person knew enough about the case to know that this man was missing. And he also took advantage of the situation. So that is somebody that could have possibly known what happened to Leon. He knew Leon wasn't calling. He called probably because he knew that Leon was dead. And he wanted to torment this poor mother again. So that's the first scam that came through. And that's also another example of a lead that the police let dwindle out and fade away. Now there's no way of finding out who made that phone call unless somebody comes forward. So this is what we need to understand. These scams happen all the time. And the reason why I talk about them is because I don't want you to have to suffer through this. You've suffered through enough. If you are a victim's family member, you've suffered through enough. You don't need anything else. Now, something else that's happened to this poor family. Irene, I believe, is the one that has been in contact, gets phone calls from psychics. These psychics, these so-called psychics, they are, I say so-called because the majority of psychics are scammers. And in this case, it definitely was a scammer. A so-called psychic called the family and said, your father isn't dead. Your father is going under the name of so-and-so Johnson. And he wants you to know that he's alive and well and he's watching out for you. Now, a hurting family, that's exactly what they want to hear. So a short time later, they get a phone call from a man that claims to be that person. If you need anything, just call me, sweetheart, at this number. I'm watching over you. Okay? When they call back, the number is disconnected. Now, they were lucky in that situation because I have seen cases where they call back and the guy says, I'm in trouble. I'm being held against my will. I need $500 or they're not going to let me go. I want to come home to you, sweetheart. Please send me $500. And they do. And they lose their $500. I've seen people and families be taken for thousands of dollars through scams like that. So if you, for one, I've never heard of a psychic calling you. You usually contact them, So if a psychic calls you, that's the first red flag. The second red flag is if they tell you exactly what you want to hear. Because life doesn't give you what you want to hear 99% of the time. So if they're giving you exactly what you want to hear, that's another red flag. And then if they want you to call back, or if somebody else calls and plays along with the narrative, that's another red flag. Okay. And of course, if they ever ask for money, that's the final red flag.
Yes. And
you just need to write them off.
Because genuine advocates, they won't ask you for a dime.
No. And 90% of them won't call you.
Right.
I've never heard of a psychic calling a customer.
No.
It's always the other way around. No. So here's the theories in this case. So we're trying to wrap it up within an hour. Here's the theories. The first one is a mob hit. Now, he did get into a fight at that specific bar called Tin Pan Alley. He got in a fight with some mob associates there. Now, if he got into a fight with mob associates there, it could have been just because of his mouthiness or the fact that he was drunk and unruly, or it could have been the fact that he was a drug dealer and he was stepping on their territory. Okay? He could have been the fact that he was doing something that business-wise. Now, if he was just mouthy at a bar, he probably walked away. He may have got a beating, but he walked away. But if he was stepping on their business, they could have definitely come after him. Now, the only thing that kind of lends a string to connect that theory is the slight chance that watcher was real. And if that strange watcher was real, that kind of aligns into the misaligned morality of some mobsters. Now, mobsters will kill you, but then they will go to your funeral and give your mother flowers out of respect. They might kill you, but then they will watch over your child and make sure your child's okay. So I don't believe that watcher is reality. But if there's a slight chance that it was, that is one thin thread that could lead to mob style slaying. The other one is Gigi's revenge. So Gigi did get a broken nose, if that was true, and her brothers came after him. That is the obvious answer, and I just have a hard time thinking that the cops couldn't figure that one out in 43 years. Unknown revenge. This is the one that I kind of tend to. I have a specific theory about this case that is not going to be politically correct. So I try to keep it to myself, but I'm going to say this in a somewhat polite, cryptic way, and you can follow my vibe. Okay. If somebody investigating this wants to talk to me, reach out to me. I will give you my specific theory and I'll give you all of my facts and reasons for it. Okay. But I don't want to destroy the case, so I'm not going to, you guys will come to your own conclusions. Unknown revenge is the theory I stick with. There's an unknown avenger there. Somebody in Leon's life had a motive to take him out. Who had the most motive? Look at all the people closest to him. Who had the most motive? Who had the most seeds of vengeance sowed within them? Who had the true desire to get rid of him? Okay. Who wanted to control the situation? Who wanted to control the narrative before and after this happened? Who wanted to take advantage of this? Who did that? Somebody in his life had more motive than maybe even Gigi's brothers. Now, Leon's lifestyle opened the door to way too many theories. So in this situation, he was well known to sleep around with many women. Did he get a hold of somebody's wife? Did he get a hold of somebody's daughter? He was a drug dealer. He was known to sell drugs to underage people. So did he get somebody's daughter hooked on drugs? Did he get somebody's wife hooked on drugs? Did he sell drugs to the wrong person? Did he step on another drug dealer's toes? So this is so many other little ways and theories that this could happen, but I contend somebody close to him, very close to him, had a better motive than just Gigi's brothers. So my second option is Gigi's brothers, but I firmly believe there was someone closer to him than Gigi that had a better motive. And I contend that this person also controlled the narrative for the next 43 years. So I believe that somebody closer to him knows what happened. They may or may not be directly involved, but I do know somebody close to him knows what happened. So after 43 years and after everybody's dead, give his daughter a break. Give his daughter the answers she needs. Bring him home so she can bury him next to her grandfather and she feels like she has fulfilled her purpose. Okay. She has made a promise to her grandfather to keep searching for this man she doesn't even know for him. And so let her fulfill her life's purpose by giving her the answers she needs. Okay. Now, the police have already said you can call anonymous. They'll take whatever tips they can. They just want to find the guy. They want to bring him home. The last theory, which I think is kind of BS, and this is what we'll close it with. The last theory is that he got out of his vehicle that night to go pee. He stumbled off into the wilderness of Ohio in his drunken state, and somehow he fell, he hurt himself, he died out in the wilderness. I have a hard time thinking that that is legitimate, just simply because something would have turned up over 43 years. Yeah. So somebody would have found his clothes, somebody would have found his watch, somebody would have found his shoe, something, and nothing has turned up over all of these years. So to me, I contend somebody closest to him knows what happened. Somebody very close to him knows. And it's time for the police to put a little pressure on those closest to him to come forward and tell what happened, because I believe this daughter is trying to get answers. You know, she's even said, she goes, I don't even need to know what happened. I just need to bring him to my grandpa and bury him there. And I'm like, if you can't honor that, I mean, where's your humanity? If you can't even, I don't care how much you hated the guy, you know, if you can't honor that, you better question your humanity. I mean, really, I mean, you might be one step off from, you know, insane if you can't think and understand what the daughter's plight is here. So that's what I got. And you have final thoughts?
When not having an answer, like his daughter has been working on this all her life. His parents who passed away, trying to get answers. Are we going to pass that down to his grandchildren? That's going to be their life trying to find answers.
Yep. You're cursing the next generation, just on and on and on until they finally give up and say they don't care when they really do. And so that's kind of where we're at. Okay, Tammy, I haven't heard much out of you. Do you have any final closing thoughts before we jump off of this?
I hope somebody comes forward soon because time's running out.
Well, that's the whole concept. The time is literally almost gone in this situation. There isn't a lot left they can do. We just need somebody to suck it up and come forward and say, hey, I know what happened. And he's over here. And that's all we need. We need a body so this daughter can bury him next to his dad, and then she can find peace, and then, like Cricket said, the next generation can too. All right, guys, that's what we got for this week. Next week hopefully will be a little bit less difficult of a conversation, but I feel like these difficult conversations, everybody wants to kind of beat around the bush and not deal with the core problem of the conversation. And so I think the difficult conversations are the most important ones that we need to have. And so I try not to skirt around them. It'd be real easy just to skip this case and move to the next one. But I feel like this family needs answers just as much as every other family out there. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure subscribe, like, share, check out Bones Coffee. You're going to see the commercial here. I will see you guys next time. Today's episode is brought to you by Bones Coffee Company. You can forget about boring coffee when you drink Bones Coffee. Not only do they offer a variety of flavors such as strawberry cheesecake and maple bacon, they are a family-owned company that puts great detail not only in their coffee, but in the artwork that comes on each individual bag. Bones Coffee has a coffee club that will deliver your favorite coffee to your door every month. If that wasn't enough, they also have some amazing swag to offer. Check out Bones Coffee Company today. I'll have my affiliate links in the show notes for you.